operations that poet perform to so that this becomes a poem, right? So one of the most obvious operation is this one. Am I clear? So these operations are what it seeks to describe. So and what is this operation? These are several devices, techniques that poet has used, and that technique is you break up line in a particular format, right? Why does a poet do that? Is to signal that the meaning of yesterday is not the same as you use in everyday life, to mark its difference, to make it unfamiliar, right? To defamiliarize it, as we have been discussing. And this is what structuralists try to recover. What are the devices that are used? And these devices, conventions, codes are like language, linguistic code जैसे codes हैं ये, क्योंकि ये communication के code है. यानी कविता एक प्रकार की भाषा है, दूसरे प्रकार की भाषा है. हम बोलते हैं वो एक भाषा है, और कविता में दूसरी भाषा ही है. Another kind of language is used. So that's what I meant by saying language within language, which literature uses. And this language within language consists of those techniques that poets have used, or writers or the novelists have used, or a short story writer or a playwright has used. Now you have to find out that those devices. The knowledge of those devices is called literary competence. So what does it mean? Like linguistic competence, right? For example, if you want to understand what I'm saying just now, you require linguistic competence. The knowledge of language, right? In same way, to understand a poem or a novel or a literary text, you should have literary competence, that is knowledge of techniques and devices and conventions that authors, writers follow. So it is analogical application of linguistics, right? If you look at the end of the page, one takes linguistics as an analogy, which indicates how other cultural artifacts should be studied. And he goes on to give this example of Lang and Perrault. Is that clear, Pankaj?
Yes, sir. It's funny to say I didn't understand that sentence because of the linguistic thing here.
Competence.
Yes,
No,
linguistic
that's
competence.
not,
I did understand the literary meaning because I have read and researched about the article, but I wasn't able because of the words used in the sentence structure, because of the sentence
okay.
structure.
No, but what he is saying is also something that you did not know. Maybe there is something like critical competence. That is, you have to understand, so you should have knowledge of how criticism works. And that is what, after all, you are trying to learn as part of criticism classes. You are imbibing, you are equipping yourself in terms of terminological tools, right, that you use to analyze or look at narratives, films, literary texts, poems. So criticism is also literary competence or critical competence. That is not what Color says, but what I'm saying. So
Yes, sir.
application of linguistics is a kind of grammatical application, or you try to describe is using various theories of linguistics. The second is you use that as an analogy for interpreting literary text. You try to look at literary competence, right? And something called poetics. Literary competence comes from your knowledge of poetics. And what do we mean by poetics is this, right? Remember what we discussed yesterday? Eichenbaum and Jacobson says that the object of study of literature is literariness, which is techniques and devices, different lang, different codes, conventions, and this is called poetics. Is what is poetics का मतलब क्या है, समझ में आ गया? जैसे कि इस पोएम में ये डिवाइस है, repetition is the device. Red rolls. Now this sounds odd in everyday conversational language, right? when you say I am wearing red dress, so it will sound awkward, artificial, contrived. But when you read this in a poem, you naturalize it by explaining away its what should I say, agrammaticality. That's the term used by some other theorist. But it means you don't use this in everyday conversation. A red rose, Anna. You don't use rhymes, June or tune. In your everyday conversation, do you use rhymes? Yes, no? How many of you use rhymes?
No, sir.
That is,
No.
that's a contrivance, right? So you have to explain away why rhymes are used. And you say, oh, this is because this is the convention of poetry. That's why the rhymes are used, right? So that is called resembleization or naturalization of something which looks artificial, contrived, unnatural, is made into natural. So rhyme is unnatural, right? Or simile, like my love is like a red rose that's newly sprung in June. My love is like a melody that's sweetly played in tune. Now that's a natural use of language, right? So to naturalize it, you should have some competence of knowledge of devices used by the writers, and those devices are what are being studied in structuralism. Okay. Any question regarding this? Any other question?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. So that's the distinction. That's the discussion on structuralism for you. And Russian formalism as well, right? Very interestingly, structuralists also make a distinction while you read a novel or a short story or any narrative between what they call fabula and sujet. And that's the term given by Slavinsky again. Let me present it. क्या होता है ये? Okay. Fabula and sujet distinction means that, for example, you read a novel, right? You have read novels. All of you have read novels. How many of you have read novels?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We've read.
Achha. Others haven't read. Only Riddhi has read.
No, sir, we've read.
Yeah.
Yes,
Sir,
So
which novel, sir?
any novel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a novel involves a kind of somebody asks you what's the story of the novel, right? When you watch a film, somebody asks you story. So you give an outline of A happens, B happens, C happens, D happens. So you give a chronology of events that are there in a story, a novel or a story or a poem. So that is called fabula, right? And sujet is the way that story is told, right? I don't know how many of you loved listening to one story over and over again when you were a child. How many of you love to hear same story again over and over again, even if you knew about it?
Yes, sir.
I
The
love
reason
Yes, sir.
people why one film several times देखने वाले लोग कितने हैं?
Sir, मैं. Yes,
क्यों देखते हो आप? स्टोरी तो जानते हो, फिर भी क्यों देखते हो?
but still, sir, हर बार देखते हैं and we learn something new from that movie. कुछ बाकी रह जाता है, ऐसा लगता है. Okay. Let us see again.
Is that the reason you watch Sholay for 30 times?
No, sir, I have not
The
watched Sholay
story
for 30
line,
times.
it is.
But sir, there are some movies.
Huh. Which movie did you watch several times?
So there is a movie called Sadda Adda. It's a movie on by it's a movie of college friends. So I watched
Now
that
you know
movie
the
maybe.
story when you watch it first time, but you watch it several times because you love the way it is narrated,
Yes, sir.
way the story is presented, right?
And
So,
especially I love South movies. The way they represent
right.
it.
Exactly. So story in itself is hardly important. Fabula is not very important. The way story is told using flashback, using various kinds of devices and techniques that we were discussing. So in matters of poetry, you may say that this is a kind of fabula, right? Simple utterance. But this is the way it is presented, the sujet. It's broken up in several places. I am hungry, this is fabula. But if you present it this way, it makes it capable of generating more meanings, right? So sujet is set of those devices used by the storytellers which make story interesting, and very often they defamiliarize the storyline, right? So it's also called story versus discourse. Story is fabula and sujet is called discourse. So these are the distinctions given by Slovinsky, right? So this is a mere chronological sequence. And this is the way in which it is narrated. Yes, using devices like flashback, close-ups, etc. A lot of devices are used, right? Digressions, descriptions, and so on and so forth. Right. So any questions regarding structuralism? We have covered a lot of ground. One point where we started. We started by discussing Marxism and psychoanalysis, and then we discussed structuralism and Russian formalism, right? We also discussed new criticism and moral formalism of F.R. Lewis' New Critics and T.S. Eliot, right? So we have covered a lot of grounds. We have come up to 1960. Anything that you have to ask from whatever we have discussed till now? जब से classes शुरू हुए तब से.
No, sir. For now, no. But maybe in
But you
future.
should read parallelly because it will create Alexander effect. You know what is Alexander effect?
No, sir.
Anyone
I don't.
knows? Alexander
No,
the
sir.
Great started embarked upon his conquest of world, right? So he started from Greece and he conquered several lands, Egypt, and he came to India. But by the time he came to India, the places that he had conquered were lost. तो हम स्ट्रक्चरलिज्म और रशियन फॉर्मलिज्म तक पहुंच गए, मगर पहले की जो जमीन जीती थी वो सब चली गई. ऐसा होने की संभावना है. Did you get what I am saying?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Understood, sir. Understood, sir.
Does it happen with you?
Yes, sir, it has happened a lot of
Yes,
times.
sir, it does. Yeah.
So what's the
So we
best
have
way to avoid that?
to keep going back to it and
reading
Keep
it.
reading.
To
Yes.
read it regularly. Yeah.
Yes. And how many of you do that?
Yes,
No,
I do that, but
I think
sometimes
most
I
of
miss it.
sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. So,
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Okay, what are you saying, Shikha?
So sorry, my nephew entered the room. 1 second.
Acha. Because we are going to start a new topic called
Yes.
deconstruction today.
Yes, sir.
So ऐसे ना हो कि अलेक्जेंडर द ग्रेट जैसे आप लोग हो, या आप लोग भी ग्रेट हो अलेक्जेंडर जैसे, मगर उसके जैसी परिस्थिति आपकी ना हो.
No, no.
Okay. So you should be reading parallelly, especially from Selden's book and Habib's book, right? Clear?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I have also posted Habib's articles on psychoanalysis, Marxism, or structuralism. You should have read that, right? And formalism as well. ये सब मैंने ग्रुप में आर्टिकल्स डाले.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's start with a new topic. And what seems to be happening from 1960s onwards is that very important theorists of this period, like Jacques Lacan, whom we discussed a bit, or Althusser, whom we discussed, or Roland Barthes, whom we touched upon just now, and Jacques Derrida. All these four people are French, right? While Marx, Freud were German, we mostly read German English critics, like E.S. Eliot, like others. What happens is that Saussure's theory, structuralism, seems to gain a lot of prominence, and people use insights and ideas from structuralism in various domains. Right. For example, Claude Lévi-Strauss, again a Frenchman, whom we discussed, used Saussurean linguistics to analyze myths and culture in the field called anthropology. Right. A person called Jacques Lacan used a lot of ideas from Saussure to understand or to reinterpret psychoanalysis of Freud. Althusser used many of the ideas of Saussure to reinterpret Marxism. Now what happens is we begin our discussion on something called deconstruction. You might have heard this word before. How many of you have heard? I'm not asking you meaning.
Yes, I have heard.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You've heard this term before, but how many of you are have a little bit of idea of what it is? कहाँ पे, in which context did you hear this word?
Sir, I think in the context of criticism, I mean, in theories of physics and everything too, but like over here too. Like
Theories of?
I mean, when you're
theories
looking
of?
at physics and mathematical theories, we have deconstruction in those too, but in criticism too, and but I don't know how to explain it. But
I have absolutely no idea how deconstruction is used in maths or physics. I have zero knowledge.
oh, okay, sorry.
Okay, anyone else has heard this term before?
Sir, but in context,
Yeah, we have heard in last semester, like
yeah, which context to
just for the sake of the
criticism?
knowledge that there
Yeah,
is
yeah.
a term in.
Yeah, article you sent us by Habib.
Hmm. In which context did you hear this word last semester?
Just for the sake of knowledge that there is a term in literary criticism that is called reconstruction, post-structuralism.
Okay, and it came into prominence for Americans and later Indians through writings of a person called Jacques Derrida, one of the leading philosophers of 60s onwards, 1960s to 2000. He is one of the most important and influential philosophers. And he drew upon Saussure and structuralism significantly in his engagement of a philosopher named Heidegger, Martin Heidegger. And in the process, he also critiqued Heidegger and critiqued Saussure. And because of a kind of trenchant critique of structuralism, especially in the writings of Claude Lévi-Strauss and others, he is also associated with something called post-structuralism. Now, post-structuralism is largely an American term, and French philosophers and theorists do not use it very often. Derrida would not use that term to describe himself very often. Like Wordsworth would not use the term romanticism to talk about himself so much. So it is a kind of label that is given to Derrida and his impact on other thinkers like Roland Barthes and Jacques Lacan, among others. And if you look at the term post-structuralism, then the prefix post is very important here, right? So what do you mean when you use the term post? What do you understand when you hear prefix post-independence, post-modernism, post-structuralism? What do you understand by that?
The time after independence, the time after structuralism.
Okay, time after, right? After structuralism is called post-structuralism. Okay. So what does that mean? Apart from chronological, apart from indicating the chronology, structuralism आता है, फिर post-structuralism आता है, colonialism, post-colonialism, modernism, post-modernism. So apart from chronology, what does it indicate?
It indicates a different era, like the mindset of people were totally different when they were colonized, and the people who were in the era of post-colonialism, their mindset were totally different.
Right, to indicate that there is a different outlook or way of thinking, different set of preoccupations after in that subsequent period, right? That is one meaning of word post, right? For example, post graduation का मतलब क्या होगा? Some of you will be doing post graduation.
Yes, sir. So means like masters.
उसका मतलब क्या होगा? वो तो इंफॉर्मेशन दे रहे हैं, उसे मास्टर डिग्री कहते हैं. और पोस्ट ग्रेजुएशन में क्या होगा?
So sir, like the words goes, post graduation, post is after. So post graduation.
I am asking you, apart from chronology, what does it indicate? That some says that it indicates different outlook, a different way of, different mindset. So it indicates a kind of rupture or discontinuity between two periods. That's what Tatsam says, right? So post-graduation, what do you understand by that?
Like sir, the formal studies in which we engaged ourselves after graduation.
But is there anything else apart from chronology? मैं वही पूछ रहा हूँ. जैसे तूने बताया कि बिल्कुल अलग mindset होता है.
हाँ.
तो MA आप करोगे तो बिल्कुल नया सब कुछ होगा या BA का कुछ आएगा उसमें?
नहीं सर, BA का आएगा, लेकिन it will be in detail.
There will be a more intensified study.
More intensified. more intensified, more detailed? Anything else?
And even so, there will be something new also.
There will be something new. What else?
The new faculties.
New faculties. Okay, all this is informative, but I am asking something which is qualitative. For example, you said it's more intensive, it's more detailed. So it does not really indicate कि BA में जो कुछ आप पढ़ा है वो भूल जाओगे और कुछ बिल्कुल नया पढ़ोगे, ऐसे होने वाला है?
नहीं सर, ऐसा नहीं होना.
नहीं, right?
It will also have more derived connections between what we
Right.
already studied and what we are going to study, and the critiques regarding that. And
So there will be further connections and extensions of something, right? So you can see that there are two ways of thinking about post. एक तो एक टाइम पीरियड खत्म हो गया और बिल्कुल नया शुरू हुआ, ग्रेजुएशन और पोस्ट ग्रेजुएशन, या कॉलोनियलिज्म खत्म हो गया और बाद में एक बिल्कुल नया दौर आया जहां नए सोच से लोग सोचने लगे, utter discontinuity. On the other hand, it also implies that whatever happened during colonialism, right, is taken into a new, different direction. There is more intense, more more extensive, more detailed, more advanced versions of colonialism. ऐसे भी हो सकता है ना? So post-structuralism indicates this, both these seemingly contradictory meanings of the term post. Post does not only mean कि ये खत्म हो गया और इस अब बिल्कुल नया दौर शुरू हो गया, right? इतना बड़ा rupture हो गया, discontinuous, that there is no connection between modernism and postmodernism, or colonialism and post-colonialism, right? Or it may also indicate that whatever was happening in colonialism is also happening in a very different way in post-colonial period, right? And it also means कि आप जो कुछ पढ़ रहे हो उसी के ऊपर we are building on top of that in post graduation on your knowledge of undergrad, right? Whatever you studied in undergrads, now we are building on top of that. So postmodernism indicates modernism के ऊपर क्या क्या बना है, क्या क्या changes आए हैं वो भी बताता है, क्या क्या continuities है वो भी बताता है, और कैसे changes आए हैं वो भी देखते हैं. So it's a complex prefix. So post-structuralism is to be understood in this way, right? On one hand, it seems to indicate that the key ideas of structuralism are completely rejected, खत्म हो गए, वो पीरियड, वो दौर ही खत्म हो गया और एक नया दौर शुरू हो गया. That is one meaning of the term post-structuralism, right? The other meaning of the term post-structuralism would be that the ideas of post-structuralism are now used in a very different way for very different purposes, right? That's another meaning of the term post-structuralism. And it can also mean that you are building on top of some structuralism itself. So you can see there are almost three different kinds of meanings of the term post-structuralism here. And we'll be using this discussion on also when we are looking at modernism and postmodernism. वो एक topic है हमारा, पता है हमने जो दिया है. We will be talking about, we will having a similar conversation there. Post-colonialism is a topic, postmodernism is a topic. So this is the conversation that we will revisit. But anything that you have to say about multiple meanings of the term post-structuralism? Anything you have to say? Ask. नहीं समझ में आया हो ऐसा? From what I said just now.
Yes, sir. So I did not understand. Could you maybe repeat it once again, sir, or give
Yeah,
it,
so
maybe
what
give an example or explain
so
it.
what I meant was that post as a prefix that you are going to use, like post-modern, post-colonialism, post-structuralism, post-independence, post-graduation. Wherever you use term post has several meanings. One is simple chronological one. Like graduation के बाद post-graduation, right? Structuralism के बाद post-structuralism. Modernism के बाद post-modern. This is simplest.
Okay.
But if you look at what it actually means, apart from chronology, historically, what does it mean, right? You know the difference between chronology and history, right? Historically speaking, it may mean that whatever you studied in your graduation will be done far more intensively and extensively in post graduation. यही चीजें होंगी जो आपको ज्यादा डेप्थ में जाकर पढ़ोगे आप, right? और एक्सटेंसिवली पढ़ोगे. So it indicates increase of intensity. It may also mean that one phase of something is over and now we are now looking at literature in a very different way. New way of thinking about literature भी आएगा post graduation में, right? और उसका ये भी मतलब होगा कि आप ऑलरेडी जो जानते हो ग्रेजुएशन में उसके ऊपर ही हम ऐड करेंगे, बिल्ड करेंगे. तो ये तीन मतलब निकलते हैं पोस्ट ग्रेजुएशन के. तो वैसे ही तीन मतलब निकलते हैं स्ट्रक्चरलिज्म के.
Okay.
One indicates that chronologically the era of structuralism is finished and a new era has begun, right? Secondly, it means that there is certain kind of rejection of structuralism, right? Third is you are using the ideas from structuralism in a very different context and different ways. So all these three seemingly different meanings sit together historically in post-structuralism, and that is what I meant.
Okay, yes, sir.
Right? Okay. So, and one of the leading figures is Derrida, and he is reinterpreting a very important German philosopher named Heidegger. Heidegger coined the term above, A-B-B-A-U, above, or in German, it's called above, right? Is the screen visible to you? Can
No,
you
sir,
see?
no, not yet. Okay.
Not yet?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can see now.
So now it's visible.
Okay. So he uses the term above, which Derrida translates as deconstruction in French. These are the German terms. Now, what does Martin Heidegger mean by deconstruction or above is something that we should look at. Now, Heidegger's originality lies because he almost breaks new grounds in thinking about human life and world around us. He causes nothing less than a breakthrough, not only in philosophy, but way of looking at life as well. And that's the revolutionary intervention, probably after Freud, Nietzsche, and Marx. One of the most important German philosophers is Heidegger. And his legacy is extremely controversial because he was involved in Nazi regime with the rise of Hitler. And later on, Nazi party punished him for several reasons, and he distanced himself from it. But this kind of engagement with German Nazis, Hitler's movement, has been one of the biggest controversies around Heidegger. But very quickly, I will give you very simplistic overview of his philosophy, because Derrida is in many ways post-Heideggerian philosopher, right? Post in the sense of all the senses that we use just now. He's a post-Heideggerian philosopher. That means he engages with Heidegger in a critical way. He rejects some of his ideas. He draws upon several of his insights and builds upon them, takes them in several directions. So he takes something from Heidegger and takes some key ideas from Ferdinand Saussure, right? And develops his own take on Western philosophy. So we will, Saussure we have already discussed. So let's see what Heidegger has to say. Heidegger says, and listen to this very carefully, because we are entering into really difficult domains of philosophy, that where all philosophical inquiries, starting from Saussure, and I'm sorry, Socrates, Plato, or usse pehle bhi, usually begins with a question, like, what is justice? Asks Plato. Or what is truth? What is reality? Or what is God? Or what is love? Or what is knowledge? Or what is reality? All these are the questions that our philosophical inquiry usually begins, right? How many of you ask this question? Or you may ask, who am I? How many of you have these questions? Ask these questions at least once in your life to yourself. What is love? What is justice? What is truth? What is evil? What is good? What is happiness? What is, who am I? ये सब questions में से कितने लोगों ने कुछ questions पूछे हैं अपने आप से?
So all of them.
Yes, sir.
All of them.
Same, sir.
Very good. And that is the tradition of Western thought, which begins with these inquiries. Like, say, for example, what is love? Have you asked this question to yourself?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, Heidegger says that in this kind of inquiry, one of the questions that seems to be repressed or suppressed or ignored or neglected is this question: इसका मतलब क्या है? This question of is assumed as if we know what is means, right? So when you ask yourself a question, what is love? And I'm sure many of you have asked this question to yourself, or what is God? You have assumed that you know the meaning of is. But do you? What is the meaning of is? Can anyone tell me? Is
Sir.
Or maybe something which exists.
Okay.
So we could like, it's a kind of, we can use a word relationship, is like,
Okay.
which will connect two words, like
That is grammatical meaning. It's called copula. Good. So in grammar, it's called copula, right? The Latin word for it is copula. Am, is, was, were, and so on and so forth. Right? But this question is neglected by Western philosophy, and it has resulted in the terrible conditions that we live in today. That is Heidegger's argument. We have neglected this question of is, or the question of being. That is of entity. or object that you study. So when you ask a question like, what is this pen? Right? So pen is a being with small b. But what is means is the being of being of this pen. We never ask questions regarding that. These questions uh, are overlooked. They are completely neglected in our inquiry, in our thinking about it. And this has resulted in the catastrophes like World War and environmental degradation and degradation of human life in general, right? In human society, according to Heidegger. Now, this is the blind spot. This neglect of the question of being is the blind spot. Is the blind spot of Western philosophy. What do you mean by a blind spot? Does anyone know? Blind spot क्या होता है?
Sir, a spot where we cannot see anything, so we just assume about that particular thing.
Okay.
They are still in search of that thing.
No.
So, or maybe that particular thing is ignored. So ignorance of
Blind spot, for example, if you turn back, I don't know how many of you drive four-wheeler. If you turn back while taking your car in reverse or your two-wheeler in reverse, there is a point behind where you cannot see. There is a point where you cannot see. It's part of our vision and sight that we don't know that it exists. हमें पता ही नहीं है कि वो एग्जिस्ट करता है और हमें ये भी पता नहीं है कि वो एग्जिस्ट करता है और हमें ये पता नहीं है वो भी हमको पता नहीं है. That is called blind spot. You don't know that you don't know. That's how you kept on asking this question: what is love? What is justice? What is the best possible state? Like Plato is asking, republic. What is the best? Who is the best king? When Lord Ram. We keep on asking this question: who is, what is, who is, what is. But is का मतलब क्या है? Nobody has bothered to enter to uncover is related questions, right? And that's why he forwards this thesis that this question of being has been neglected severely in the Western thought. And our way of thinking about being is that we think that the being of the being is being itself. Like a pen is, right? So what is being of this pen? It's small b. Pen is small b. Capital B वाला है. B यानी being यानी अस्तित्व, होना, होनापन. ये पेन का होनापन क्या है? तो हम वो पेन में ही ढूंढते हैं पेन का होनापन. That is our mode of thought. But being is not the being, is what he is arguing. So if you feel that we are going into very complex, abstract philosophical thought, just hold on to what we are discussing. Right? There is a tendency to think of being as being, right? And this tendency is what he calls metaphysics. So metaphysics in Heidegger is a terrible thing. It is sign of our ignorance of being. We tend to think of beings as being. And very often, if I ask you, what is being of this pen, then what will you say? What answer will you give me? What is being of this pen? इस पेन का होनापन क्या है? But do you get what I'm asking you?
So being itself a pen.
बीइंग, पेन का होनापन क्या है?
सर के पेन है.
हाँ, पेन है, मगर उसका होनापन किसमें है? क्या है होनापन उसका?
So
वो
maybe
आपके
this is
सामने,
the blind spot.
this is the blind spot. Yes, you are confronting that blind spot, right? It's essence. कीर्ति is saying essence. कीर्ति essence कहाँ पे है? उसका होनापन, essence, where is it? Or what is it? What is the essence of this pen?
Sir, like you were discussing yesterday, it exists in our minds.
It exists in your mind, okay? So it's not there in my hand.
No. Sir, it's there. But then आपने बोला कि उसका, I mean,
Existence.
yeah.
होनापन कहाँ? Okay. The problem is that we often think of beings as presence of this. पेन का प्रेजेंट में आपके सामने होना, उसे हम उसका होना समझते हैं. Here I will repeat what I said. पेन का आपके सामने होना, उसे आप होना समझते हैं. Presence of this pen in front of you is understood as its being. Right? Na.
Yes, sir.
So he coins the term metaphysics of presence. Metaphysics of presence, yani you think of being of this pen in terms of its presence. In present, abhi aapke samne hai, abhi temporality mein, this time, it's there in front of you. And that is what constitutes its essence. That is what constitutes its being according to the Western philosophy. And this is, for Heidegger, a big problem. So when you think of being as being, it allows you to use it the way you want to use it. It becomes something for you to appropriate and use. And when you start thinking about yourself as an object, present object, to be used for yourself, or you start relating to people as if they are objects, to be used, lying there for your use, then there is a tendency to exploit them, use people, use yourself. So metaphysics of presence very often results in exploitative tendencies to use others and use yourself. According to Heidegger, this metaphysics of presence. And the worst case of metaphysics of presence, according to him, is technological. Technological, for Heidegger, does not mean this. This is not technological. The essence of technology is that it's a way of being that allows human beings to plunder the other, or whatever you know. It allows you to massively exploit, especially Earth, right? So big dam is a sign of using the earth or river. It attacks the river and exploits it, right, to generate power. That is what he says. The technological is the way of being. It's not an object. It's not being. It's not gadget, but tendency to plunder something. That is part of our way of being, right? So technological for Heidegger is ontological. By ontology, you mean what something is, right? Ontology as against epistemology. Do you remember what we said? Ontology and epistemology. Remember, epistemology is when I ask question, how do I know this is a pen? Or how do I know that you exist and you are not a robot? आपके नाम तो दिख रहे हैं मेरे पास स्क्रीन पे, पर आप हो ये मुझे कैसे पता चलेगा? These are epistemological questions. Ontological questions are when you ask, what is this really? What is this pen really? Right? So ontologically, technology is inherently oppressive or exploitative way of being. I am not going into much detail, but this is what he means by metaphysics of presence, to think of being as being. You think of honapan, that is being, as being. इस पेन का होनापन आपके सामने वो है, मौजूद होना, right? That is what is meant by metaphysics of being. For him, actually, what is this pen? He would say it is, there are two things here. यहाँ पे two है, एक नहीं है. There is nothing in which you have something. Am I making some sense?
Yes, sir. There is nothing in which there is something.
Something shows up only in nothing. So nothing is the condition for something to exist. अगर nothingness नहीं होता तो ये पेन होती ही नहीं यहाँ पे. उस nothing में से पेन आती है, उस nothing में से आप आते हो, और आप सब लोग को ये awareness होती है कि आप nothing में से आए हो, and that gives rise to angst, existential angst according to Heidegger. So nothing, for him, being is basically nothing from which something shows up as present. Nothingness. How does it sound? All of us, whenever we worry, right, is at the back of our mind, we are aware of nothing, possibility of not being. Your parents are there, they may not be there. Your siblings are there, they may not be there. The possibility of not being के अंदर ही being दिखता है. Sounds scary? And that gives rise to anxiety as condition of modern life, according to Heidegger. So, what has all this to do with deconstruction? So he says that because we are used to thinking of entire Western philosophy is based on this metaphysics of presence. It is underwritten by metaphysics of presence. You have to destroy it and reassemble it. You have to reconfigure it. Destroy यानी नॉन बीइंग कर देना ऐसे नहीं, खत्म कर देना ऐसे नहीं, उसे रिकॉन्फिगर करना, रीइंटरप्रेट करना, रीस्ट्रक्चर करना. So according to Heidegger, it's a positive operation involving reassembling, decomposing and recomposing Western philosophy, which is not based on metaphysics of presence, right? Which is based on the meaning of being, which is based on our advanced understanding of being, right? And that is what he means by above or destruction. Any questions about what I have said just now? नहीं समझ में आया, ऊपर से गया?
नहीं सर, अभी तो समझ में आ गया.
So metaphysics of presence is something that has structured Western thought. It's high time we restructured it, dismantled it, and built it again. So it's a positive activity. It is not a negative activity of destruction. It is not demolition. यानी deconstruction ये तोड़फोड़ नहीं है. Deconstruction यानी पहले का पूरा स्ट्रक्चर तोड़ के नया स्ट्रक्चर बनाना, चेंज, ट्रांसफॉर्म करना स्ट्रक्चर को. So deconstruction is a transformation of thinking, which according to Heidegger will bring about transformation in the way of being. So human beings will be transformed only where the thinking is transformed through this deconstruction. Is that much clear? Anything that you have to ask anyone? Is everyone with me? Just so
Yes, yes.
कथा सत्संग प्रवचन सुनते हुए. Yeah, Kirti, go ahead. Yeah, Kirti, go ahead.
Sir, I don't have a question, but I just raised my hand to answer your question that I am with you.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Anyone? See, we are dealing with something very complex. You might have realized this by the time we started discussing criticism and theory, right? But how does it sound? Even if you feel that you have not understood it completely, how many of you find the conversations that we have in criticism class interesting?
Try.
मैं ये नहीं दावा करता कि सबको समझ में आ गया.
No, sir. I am interested, sir.
But is it interesting?
Yes, sir. I like criticism more than poems and etc.
Now, criticism is, sir, it has something to do with methodologies of studying literature or films or anything. So it's the mode by which we produce knowledge. And very often the methodological frames that we use determine what you find in the text. So if, for example, if you're looking at it from Marxist point of view, then you will discover some of the things that Marxism tells you in the text, like ideology or class conflict or whatever, right? If you are using psychoanalytical framework, then you will discover in the text things that psychoanalysis tells you. So it's like spectacles, right? So these spectacles, these lenses, not only show you the object that you are studying, but they also show different objects. यानी मान लो कि आप पत्ता देख रहे हो पेड़ का, मगर उसको माइक्रोस्कोप के नीचे देखोगे तो अलग ही पत्ता होगा, राइट? चांद देखते हो, मगर आप टेलीस्कोप से देखोगे तो अलग ही चीज दिखेगी. हाँ या ना? हाँ ना, मे बी.
Please, just repeat it.
What are other people doing? I don't know. They are asleep, chat. So, all cultural research uses these ideas, and these ideas also determine what we are looking for in the text. You discover those things that you are looking for. It's not that the text exists independently, a film or a novel or a poem or a web series exists like this, और आप उसे देखते हो. Marxism से, by the time you use Marxism or psychoanalysis or new criticism, that text shows up that way, right? So it also transforms the object of your study. That's why methodologies of research are extremely important for you, especially those of you who are planning to do research in future. We'll have to draw upon the ideas that we are discussing in this semester. जो लोग PhD करना चाहते हैं MA के बाद, राइट, कल्चर को लेके, तो उनको ये सभी आइडियाज बहुत साउंड होनी चाहिए.
So, sir, suppose if like my the area in which I am interested is like I want to represent my Porbandar culture. There is a caste in Porbandar called Mer. They have their own history. So, if I want to represent their history, then for me, the Marxism and all these theories are much important, right?
All the ideas that we are using are important in some way. So these methodologies will tell you how to understand it, right? And they will also determine what you understand. So say for example, you are using Marxism to analyze caste culture, right? And caste and class are incompatible very often.
Income.
Class implies that there is possibility of movement, upward movement in society. Caste implies there is your place in society is fixed by your birth. So caste or class, ये दो अलग ideas हैं. But class definitely impacts caste. There are people who are well-to-do in your mayor community, and there are people who are not poor. So their cultural things differ, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this is what we mean by intersectionality. That you bring caste and class both together for your analysis of culture, because one in itself is not going to be satisfactory.
Yes.
To study cultural traditions and history of a particular caste, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but as we proceed, you will see that I will be giving you more ideas when we are looking at gender as well. Feminism, gender देखेंगे तब और एक research tool मिलेगा जो आपको लाना पड़ेगा. Right? Okay. But now good, you have to relate it with your research interest. That is what I am saying.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what happens now is some of the very influential ideas by Heidegger, apart from this, is that language speaks, not man. Language is the house of being. These are very important propositions in Heidegger. Language speaks, not man. What do you mean by that? Can you tell me? अभी तो मैं बोल रहा हूं ना, और हाइडेगर कह रहा है मैं नहीं बोल रहा हूं, भाषा ही बोल रही है. And language is the house of being. These are two important propositions that Heidegger has forwarded. What do you think they mean?
So it means that like without language, how can we express what we are feeling right now? If I want to express something to you, that you are a good professor, or you teach is very well, right? That. And if language is not, then how will I express you? Even so, phonocentric is also a language. If I'm speaking something, if I want to show you something with sign, then also I need something. Without that, I will express.
But then,
yeah,
it also
go ahead.
has a drawback that sometimes a language cannot suffice what I have to say, what I have to make the opponent understand. So sometimes it's the language which is being a barrier uh, for me to convey an idea to the opponent.
Okay. Anyone else? What does this sentence mean? Language speaks,
Still,
not man.
So the way Pankti explained it to you, there also she was in need of language. Without language, how will she express something?
Okay. What he is saying that in order to tell us that language की वजह से मैं कुछ कह नहीं पाती, तो उसके लिए भी language की जरूरत पड़ती है.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Language barrier है, ये कहने के लिए भी language की जरूरत होती है. That's what he is telling you, Pankti.
I am in agreement with him, sir.
Okay.
Sir, can we say that language is, we need language to communicate something, and we as humans, or any or say any creature for that matter, is just a medium that passes the message or conveys a message. But language is, I mean, language is the one speaking, and language is using us as medium to to travel, or to travel from one place to another. Can we think of it in this way?
Okay, so you can see there are these two different views. One is Tatsam and Pankti's view. कि पहले कोई आइडिया होती है और फीलिंग होती है, फिर आपको वो वर्ड्स में कन्वर्ट करके कम्युनिकेट करना पड़ता है, एक्सप्रेस करना पड़ता है. दिस इज व्हाट तत्सम इज सेइंग, एंड वी नीड लैंग्वेज एज एन इंस्ट्रूमेंट फॉर कम्युनिकेशन, right? So this is an instrumental view of language which Tatsam is talking about, and Pankti is saying that this instrument can be flawed. It cannot express many things, but both of them are in agreement about language being an instrument of communication, right?
Because sir, if we didn't have any language, then maybe we are like animals only. We could have, because like dogs can't express what they are feeling.
Okay. Or maybe dogs have their language which you can't understand.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, but what you are saying is there is something like language which is used to express ideas, feelings, and emotions, right? That is your expressive view of language, instrumental view of language, right? But what Riddhi is saying, that it is language that is communicating, not you. मैसेज जो जा रहा है ना, वो मैसेज आप नहीं भेज रहे, वो लैंग्वेज ही भेज रही है, ऐसा कह रही है, राइट रिद्धि?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sir,
Right?
so on that
It's the
note, I
language
have
that
a
is
question.
using you. That is what she is saying. Language is using you. It is language that is communicating.
So,
That
sir,
means
can
you are not central to language. You are peripheral to communication. In communication, language is central and you are peripheral. ऐसे कह रही है रिद्धि, बराबर है?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Pankti, what were you saying?
Sir, so can we say that language is living?
Yeah, it is. But when Heidegger is saying language speaks not man, he is saying something that Riddhi is saying. That in communicative situations like this, the meaning is produced not by people, but by the mechanism of language itself. Language is primary meaning producing mechanism. Human beings are just its operators. Right? You say, I drove down to this place, but actually your machine took you. You just controlled it. Right? So you are not central to your process of going to some place. And that is what Riddhi was also using the metaphor of traveling from one place to another. Language takes you. So that means what Heidegger is saying is man is not at center of meaning production. He is decentered. Right? And Heideggerian thinking about language has become very powerful and influential, in the sense that this decentering of man, if it is applied to literature, say for example, it's not the poet who creates meaning, but it's the language which creates meaning, right? So poet gets decentered, and in Roland Barthes, the reader comes to center as the producer of meaning. So poems are produced by the readers rather than by authors, right? That is one of the important ideas of reader response theory that we'll discuss later on. But this is just a kind of touching upon this. Yeah. So this decentering of man right, as a subject is very important to Heideggerian thought, right? Not only that, when he says language is house of being, what he is saying is that for this pen to exist, right, or this phone to exist, we say this phone exists, this pen exists, but where does it exist, right? And I think Riddhi said it exists in mind. Where does this pen exist?
Yes, sir. Like it
Where does this
exists
exist? कहाँ पे है? पेन कहाँ पे है? मेरे
in
हाथ में
mind.
है, माइंड में है, या हाथ में क्या है फिर मेरे?
सर हमें पता है कि इट्स अ पेन, दैट्स द रीजन हमारे हाथ में पेन है.
Okay.
I mean कि
So is
we have
so
idea
the
that this is
example
pen.
you gave, the example you gave of a culture where there is no tradition of writing. So for them when you ask, okay, what is a pen or what is it that I'm holding in my hand, for them the pen will exist in your hand and not in their minds.
But will it
That
be a
will be the
pen?
difference.
No. For those cultures who do not have an idea of writing or pen, will this मेरे हाथ में जो है वो पेन होगा या और कुछ होगा?
No, sir. It'll just be an object for them because it will not mean anything.
It would be nothing.
Yes, sir.
A thing. पता नहीं क्या है. So where does this pen exist?
In our minds.
हाथ में क्या है फिर?
Just an object that we associate a particular meaning to.
Consider what Heidegger is saying is that this pen exists in language. Pen कहाँ पे है? It's neither in my mind nor in my hand. It exists in language as an idea, as a concept, as a signifier and as a signified. It's part of language.
Yes, sir.
How does that sound, Riddhi?
So it's difficult to understand.
So those cultures which do not have idea of writing or pen would not have any words to express the idea of pen.
Yes.
Right? So it does not exist in their language. So it does not exist in their thinking because thinking is made up of language, right?
Okay, so, yes, that makes sense. I understood it.
So pen does not exist in your mind. It does not exist in my hand. It exists in language.
In the language. Okay.
So now, where does Riddhi exist? Where does Riddhi exist? Where does Tatsam exist? Where does Pankti exist? Is it where you are sitting?
No, sir. It's a language.
In the language. Tatsam कहाँ पे है?
It's a language में.
Language. So you can see that what we mean by subject, right, as subjectivity, is also something that is situated within language, right? And building upon these two ideas, Jacques Lacan says this. This is what Lacan says. Unconscious is structured like language. Your subjectivities have the structure of language. Unconscious and lang are same. Dreams are the paroles. Right? That's what he's saying. And he's also saying that self, human subject, is decentered. There is decentering of human self that you find here. So in Heidegger and Lacan's Freud, Lacan's interpretation of psychoanalysis, structuralist interpretation of psychoanalysis, language is a decentered structure, right? There is no subject at the heart of it. There is no individual subjectivity, but subjectivity is just housed in language as a decentered structure. So you are on the peripheries of your own existence, right? So this decentering is a very important idea in post-structuralist thought. And you can see that it comes from structuralist interpretation of Heidegger and of psychoanalysis, right? And you find that even in Marx, that your thinking is shaped by your class economic relations, right? And you have repressed it, but your all thinking is shaped by your economic conditions. So you are not at the center of your world. You are decentered in relation to the world in which you are living, right? So this decentering is a very important idea. Yeah.
So I have a question.
Hmm.
So what if language didn't exist?
What? Tell me, you tell me, what would not? अगर language गायब हो जाती है कल, तो क्या-क्या चीजें गायब हो जाएगी?
So maybe everything.
जैसे?
So we won't be able to communicate properly.
But we कैसे होगा? We ये pronoun कैसे होगा? Language ही चली जाएगी तो. You are saying we exist करते हो और language बाद में आती है और आप we को express करते हो language में. But what I am saying, ये जो we है ना, वो भी language के अंदर है. और वो भी एक pronoun ही है. यानी we भी नहीं रहेगा.
So nothing. Yeah.
क्योंकि we ये भी तो सोच से ही आया है ना आपके. और सोचना linguistic act है ना?
Yes, sir.
When you say I is a pronoun. And when you are thinking, you are using it as to refer to you, right? In enunciation. We made a distinction between enunciate and enunciation, right? I am hungry as a grammatical structure.
Yes, sir.
And as a thought, it is enunciation. As a thought or as an utterance. Right? What is happening? This is mere grammatical structure. But here, I is meant to mean Tatsam or Sachin or Pankti or whoever. And Riddhi or whatever. And hungry is a word. But it's used to refer to your own feelings that you're having in your belly. Right? So, enunciation में grammatical structure आता है. Right. So that is some of the key ideas of post-structuralism. Now, what does Derrida do? Right? Derrida, from this position, launches a critique of structuralism. Right? Especially the one that you find in Saussure and in Claude Lévi-Strauss. Right? He is offering a critique of structuralism, and he is saying, right? And I will just give you an example of what he is trying to say. For example, now that you have got how language is house of being and language speaks not man, then what is the meaning of word hungry? जो अभी हमने लिखा है, hungry का मतलब क्या है?
In need of something.
Need of something, something, कुछ भी. ये दूंगा तो ये खा जाएगा क्या?
नहीं sir, no, I'm not saying in that sense. In
Need
need of
what?
food, sir. In need of food.
Food. Okay, then what do you mean by food and need? Food क्या है?
It's like items we eat.
Things that you eat, okay. What do you mean by eat? And what do you mean by need?
The need is something which we need for survival.
Okay, then what is survival? Okay, so let's stop this for a moment. Say for example, you come across a difficult word called dog in your novel पढ़ रहे हो और एक बहुत difficult word आता है कोई भी और आप डिक्शनरी में देखते हो dog is a canine, right? तो फिर आपको लगे ये कैनाइन क्या होता है, फिर आप डिक्शनरी में से डी पे से सी में जाओगे, then it will define a canines are those mammals which have this characteristic. तो फिर आपको लगे ये कैरेक्टरिस्टिक क्या है और ये मैमल्स क्या है, then you will go to M and you will start looking at mammal. And mammal is a species of living beings which reproduce and which feed without laying eggs, right? Then you would say अरे ये species क्या है, reproduce क्या है. So ultimate meaning will never be found. Am I making some sense?
Yes, sir.
Ultimate meaning of the word dog will never be found. Or to use Derrida's term, transcendental signified will never be found. All signifieds are within the structure of language. There is nothing outside of text. That is his very famous sentence. Yeah.
So even if I go back to the word dog after reading all of the words, searching for all of the words, what then?
There is no place to, ultimately it won't come to any stop. It will be perpetually deferred. Like what is the meaning of word dog? Then it's a kind of canine, right? Which is supposed to remain loyal to its master. Then you will look up canine kya hai, loyal kya hai, master kya hai. Canine is a kind of species of mammals. Then you will say species kya hai, mammals kya hai. Then mammals dekhte ho. Species ki definition dekhte ho. Every time the meaning is postponed, right? It is deferred. The meaning is perpetually deferred. Does it make sense? By meaning को हम कह सकते हैं is perpetually deferred. Does that make sense? What I mean by meaning being perpetually deferred? That means you will never come to rest saying, yes, this is the final ultimate meaning. Because that ultimate meaning will also lead you to other words in the dictionary. So you can say dictionary is the language, the text. Yeah. And there is nothing outside of dictionaries. Right? Is it clear? Any doubts about what I'm saying?
No, sir.
Deferred, transcendental signified being deferred. Okay. Now, once it's deferred, Saussure has told us one more thing. I don't know if you remember. He says that there are no positive elements in language. There are only negative relational terms. So, word dog is understood You should know what is non-dog to understand what is dog, right? Just like ये पेन और नो पेन बताया मैंने, है ना? नो पेन नथिंग है तो ही उसमें पेन आ सकता है. आपको दिखता एक ही है मगर दो चीजें हैं. नथिंग है जिसके अंदर पेन है, राइट? सो डॉग ऑल्सो इज, नो डॉग के स्पेस में डॉग होता है, राइट? देयर आर ओनली डिफरेंसेस. This is what Sashor has said. So far with me?
Yes, sir.
So the meaning of dog is neither positive nor is it present. It is perpetually deferred. It is deferred and it is deferred. So Derrida combines these two terms. In a neologism. Called difference. This is the key term in Derrida. This is the key idea in deconstruction. So differ or defer in French would mean have a same pronunciation, difference. If difference ऐसे pronounce करते हो मगर लिखते हो एक ही spelling, spelling एक ही है, pronunciation अलग है. Any questions about difference? Difference is a neologism that Derrida has coined, combine differ and differ, right? To mean both differ and differ. So the ultimate meaning of the word dog is does not exist, right? And arbitrariness bhi to hai na. For example, you can understand even the meaning of the word centaur or unicorn, right? Or dragon, even if you have not seen those things, right? You know, have the idea. So there is no presence. There is no ultimate presence outside of language, linguistic system, outside the structure, right? So there is no center to that structure. However, all Western philosophy is based on the belief that there is a transcendental signifier. So that is the blind spot of Western philosophy, according to Derrida. Anything that you have to say? Is it clear, not clear?
So till now it's clear, but maybe in future, like after reading this.
Okay. So what happens according to, and I will take 5 more minutes because फिर वो अजीब हो जाएगा, बीच कहीं में टूट जाएगा, हमारा लिंक निकल जाएगा हमारा conversation का. इसलिए he says that in structuralism all binarisms, right, S, Z, P, V, ये तो पता है ना, we discuss किया था ना, if you remember this, S, Z, P, B, all binarisms, dog, non-dog, male, female. So structure, according to structuralism, is based on binarisms of all kinds. White, black, male, female, speech writing, good, evil, God, devil, and so on and so forth. All binarisms are at the heart of any system of communication. Any semiological system is built upon binarism, inside, outside. और क्या है? It's just all these are binarisms in structuralism, right? And what happens is that there is a tendency to consider all these as equivalents. Structuralism के नजरिए से सब equivalent है, but actually in life if you look at the way human beings think, right, in Western philosophy, all this is largely asymmetrical. This term is considered natural. Good, male, white. One thing is seen as positive and other thing is seen as lacking this. That is, female is defined as absence of masculinity. Good is defined as absence of evil. And evil is defined as absence of good. White is considered positive, black is considered negative. Inside is considered positive, outside is considered negative. Nature is considered positive, culture is considered inferior, right? There are many such binarisms. According to structuralism, they are all, one is dependent on the other for definition, right? Dog is dependent on not dog. But in actual life and in Western philosophy, one is considered as positive and present, while the other is defined in a negative way. You get that? This is because of metaphysics of presence, which is called logocentrism by Derrida. That one is considered self-evident positive, male is natural positive content, female is a derivative, female is a being who lacks masculine quality, or black is seen as somebody who lacks white qualities, and hence white is superior to black, male is superior to female. That is how people have thought. All philosophers in West have thought in this way. But in actuality, male is as much defined by female, white is as much defined as black, good is as much defined by evil, and uh, nature is as much defined by culture as something. Speech is seen as positive, complete presence. Writing is seen as inferior or something which is lacking in the presence of speech. इसलिए अब जब हम बात कर रहे हैं तो we are face to face, so it creates an illusion of presence, right? That you are in front of me. But this illusion of presence can be broken if I tell you that many of the people in the class are doing something else, not listening. They are somewhere else, right? So presence is very often privileged, leading to white being seen as superior, presence which is privileged. What? Nature is privileged over culture, and so on and so forth, right? This is Derrida's critique of structuralism. So what does he do? He subverts those binaries and produces alternative readings of the same text. This act is called deconstruction. He shows that how masculine is dependent on feminine for definition. Had there been no feminine, there wouldn't be any masculine. It is something which is seen as natural, self-evident, present is seen as contingent and dependent. White is seen as absence of black. Black is positive. So he subverts, यानी उल्टा कर देता binary, right? He subverts these binaries. Right? And he produces alternative readings of the same text. And he leaves you with undecidability or aporia between interpretation A right? This is Derrida's take, that is Derrida's approach to Western philosophy. He produces exactly opposite interpretation of interpretation. And leaves you in a state of undecidability. So this is where I want to stop for today. I have taken 10 more minutes, but it's a heavy duty philosophical course. Now what you will do is you will read about Derrida, right? And we will have further conversation on it in the next class, next Friday. What is your take on this? ये सब सुन के आपको क्या आता है दिमाग में?
Sir, it kickstarts our thinking in different direction, and sometimes it makes me numb to think about such things, and ultimately sometimes it brings confusion also. It makes me question things.
Very
So
good.
I don't know
Can you be
sometimes.
specific? Where is it that you start thinking on different lines? Where is it that you get confused? Where is it that you start questioning something? Can you be specific from your own experience of it?
Okay, so just when we were discussing about the binaries, so I was able to relate one thing with the binary, that if we are studying these theories, So are they simplifying the things for me, or making it more confusing? So I
Who
was,
is who is simplifying things? These theories.
yeah, these theories.
Ah, yeah, yeah. Good. So what gets more complicated because of theory?
Um, so then at last I just, end up saying myself, okay, that is, everything can be situational. So, and that is how, I just calm myself down with, when I'm between the two in the confusion and simplifying the things.
Uh-huh. It is you may say it is complicating simplicities of our assumption rather than saying confusing. You can use the term complicating, right? So complicating or confusion में क्या फर्क है when you are
So
complicating something? Yeah.
complicating is something when we give different, perspectives and ideas into it to know it more. But confusion is when you actually don't know about it and you just get confused. So yeah, complicating it is the right word.
And complicating is also positive thing, or is it negative? In
Yes, sir.
humanities may when you complicate something, you offer a more nuanced, more complex understanding of something rather than confusing something,
Yes, sir. It
right?
is just
Confusion
like
has
what
certain, yeah, yeah,
criticism, that
right,
it's not negative, but it is also positive.
right. Yeah, Khushi, what do you have to say about our discussion today? सुन के क्या दिमाग में क्या आ रहा है? खुशी? Okay. Yes, Kirti, would you like to respond? Because you have also taught these things for several years, and you have read all this. So, in today's conversation, what is your take on today's conversation?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Huh. Yes, sir. I have been teaching these things for 6 to 7 years,
yeah,
and I just wanted to write in our group that once again a crystal clear class from you, because
okay,
even I had certain confusions about socio and all. And what I just my take is on theory that it would make you silent, uh,
okay,
silent in terms of more understanding, because once
okay,
in humanities when we start arguing, no, we argue more when we know less. Okay.
okay.
So yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so there was clarity, and you also enhanced your understanding of theory and
Yes, yes,
argumentation.
sir.
Yeah, that's some. What is your take on these ideas? जो आजकल हमने आज डिस्कस किया उसके ऊपर आपकी प्रतिक्रिया क्या है? व्हाट्स योर टेक?
So I think so is it possible to relate it in my interested area, as I said?
That's a question that came to your mind. Okay, so that's the research question. जो
Yes, sir.
आपको सवाल का जवाब आपको ढूंढना है क्योंकि रिसर्च एरिया आप जानते हो आपका, मैं नहीं जानता.
Okay, sir.
So fine, ask yourself if you can relate. Very good. But that is a very interesting way of looking at it, that you connect what today's discussion with your area of interest, research interest. Very good. What else comes to your mind? In general कुछ आता है?
So in general, I think like I understood everything, but still I have to read it so that I can
create some questions and.
Okay, right. जनक और शब्बीर कुछ कहना चाहते हो? You studied it again, right? You already had studied it.
Yeah, yes, sir. It reminded me of one of the essays by E.V. Ramakrishnan. In translation classes, we were discussing how do we make a case for Indian theories of translation. And in that essay, E.V. Ramakrishnan makes a case regarding these theories, that these theories are highly monolingual. But in a way, when we talk about the idea of understanding meaning or understanding what is meaning, I think these theories are almost similar when we use these theories for Indian languages also. Because if we say we want to understand darkness or light in Gujarati or Hindi, I mean, we use almost similar ideas in understanding meaning. So it makes a connection there, sir.
Okay, so you found connections between India and also found certain limitations
Yeah.
of these theories in their monolingual orientation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is what
Yes,
I
sir.
think
Yes.
Devi was saying, I think, not Devi.
Yes, sir.
Devi
Yes.
में. Yeah, जनक
Ramakrishna. Yeah.
जनक कुछ कहना चाहते हो?
I had a question, sir, but
हाँ बोलो ना. पूछ लो, पूछ लो.
considering the fact that we are people who are involved in academia, dealing with these theories involves asking and reconsidering our own ways of thinking. So
So this is something
primarily,
what even Pankti was saying, that you end up asking questions and you may complicate certain things and it can also cause confusion. And Sabir is asking about how you can relate it to Indian context. There are certain things which can be of use. And Tatsam is also asking how it can be related to his own area of interest. So yes, so what came to your mind?
yeah, the question was about Heideggerian being and how much of that relates to Kantian noumena.
Yes, it belongs to the tradition of German philosophy and Kant, Hegel onwards, Nietzsche onwards. I think Kant is more into epistemologies and Heidegger is questioning ontological outlook. And that is not something which Kant has extensively. And noumena is probably one of his weakest link where he was severely criticized later on between noumena and phenomena. But again, connecting it to Heidegger is Heidegger still relies on phenomenology in his approach. His method for studying being is phenomenological. At the same time, he is critiquing Kant. And like Hegel also is phenomenology of spirit and mind. So phenomenology as a philosophical tradition is something in which Heidegger is also working. Is something that you can point out. But his complaint is that neither Kant nor Hegel or nor others extensively engaged with the question of being.
Right.
That is his complaint.
Asking Kant, how does he know noumena exists in itself is a deconstructionist question.
It's a deconstruction of Kant.
Okay.
And it's a binary, right? Noumena, phenomena. So, yes. In order to, and it becomes a metaphysical idea in the sense that you are trying to retain God in the domain of noumena.
That was also something we discussed. Yes.
Yes, okay. So it was good conversation, difficult conversation to listen to. Difficult in many senses of word, not just in terms of difficulty in understanding, but also disturbing our existing assumptions of our life. Right? In that sense also it's difficult. Anyway, so we stop here for today and we continue discussion on deconstruction and post-structuralism in our next classes. Right? Okay, so have a nice weekend. Stay safe, all of you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Bye, sir.
Yeah, and see you next week.
Thank you, sir. Bye, sir.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you, sir.